my name is Patrick from Cophi, and today we're going to do again a very nice webinar, and hopefully you're going to learn something from it. I'm going to start with a little personal story. I have been working before I worked in Cophi. I've always worked in big organizations such as Unilever and Starbucks, and then in Friesland-Campina. And in 2012, about 13 years ago, I started to work in Friesland-Campina in Indonesia, and we had an amazing company there of about 700. It is a dairy company, obviously, selling milk across the peninsula. And we had about 4,500 employees. We had about 700 million in revenue. And the business wasn't really in a good shape. So they basically replaced, when I came, I was part of a major transition. The whole management team was replaced by a new one. And the task was for us to kind of bend around the business and bring it back to success again. And that was, how do you then start? And what we did is we started the obvious way. We hired an amazing consultant, which was called Boston Consultancy Group. And we did a 14 weeks crash project with the board and with the leadership team of this company. And we developed together our strategy, which was an amazing plan. But then the thing comes, how do we realize that plan? And how do we make sure that the system we have, i.e. our people and the teams that all have their own tasks, that they all jump on the seesaw together to make the plan happen? And that's not easy. We have 3 time zones. We have 4,500 employees. We have more than 200 distributors. Major complexity. How do you know if people understand the strategy across the company? How do you know if information gets shared with the teams? How do you know if people understand what's expected from them? How do you know if there is trust in some areas where teams need to work together? Can they work together? Do they feel safe to give feedback to each other? All these things that belong to collaboration. That is very difficult. And that's mobilizing of people to execute your plan. That's exactly where Cophi comes in. Today, what I'm going to talk with you about is basically 2 things. We're going to talk about strategy execution and how Cophi can help to improve that. For that, what I'm going to do first, I give you a little framework to make you understand what strategy execution is about. And then I'm going to show you what Cophi does, how it works. I show you a product demo. And then I will give you 1 customer case, and then there is some time left to do a Q&A. So with that said, let me share my screen. So what do I mean by strategy execution? Great strategies, such as ours in Indonesia by that time, they need fully aligned organizations to deliver outstanding results. And to do that, basically all your organizational components need to be aligned. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The input, which you have, is your strategy. By that time, the great story, we developed a great pile of paper we created together with Boston Consultancy Group. We've got our identity of a dairy company in Indonesia with over 100 years presence in the market. And then, of course, there were we as leaders and the architect of the system. And the system we have in our company that together delivers this plan exists of several elements. You've got the tasks that need to be done by the teams and the people. Then you've got the people with their skills. Then you've got the structure. How are they organized? How is the governance organized? What systems do we have to report, exactly? And last but not least, there is the culture. And when all these elements are in alignment, then you can come to performance. So if I give you an example, if your strategy is to become an innovator or in the market and a disruptor, but your culture is one which is very slow and acting, let's say, like the government, and it's hard to get decisions from it, and there is low risk profiles, or if the structure of your company is like, I need to get 10 signatures to get a minimum viable product going out and an innovation out to the market. This is what I mean by incongruencies. And if these incongruencies are there, your performance will not come. And the hard part is, how do you know where these bottlenecks are in the organization that stop you from bringing your strategy to performance? And this is where Cophi comes in. What we do at Cophi, we make invisible collaboration visible and measurable. And because you can see it, you can see how the system functions, we can unlock powerful conversations, real conversations, the ones that are normally hard to have, to mobilize your organization for change and success. And how do we do that? We do that by combining social network data and artificial intelligence and system coaching. And by throwing these 3 eggs in a basket, we can help organizations to do what I just told you. The first most important thing is to start to understand what we mean by a network where people collaborate. What do we mean by collaboration? And we've done years of research, and there are basically 3 types of human interactions. One is you've got operational collaboration, which is how people get together on a daily basis to share information with each other, to solve problems, and to manage projects. And then you've got strategic collaboration, which is around strategic clarity. Like, where are we going together? Why should we work together? How do my goals relate to yours, etc.? And then it's about continuous improvement. And the last aspect, which is there, and sure not the least important, is social interactions, which is around your feedback culture, and it's around psychological safety. And across all these 3 types of collaboration and those sub-networks, we can show you where teams and people, where they interact well and where the bottlenecks are, so that you can take action to make it work better. And we measure this collaboration between teams with one simple KPI, and it's the net collaboration score. And the net collaboration score works like a net promoter score. When it's red, something isn't working in the system, and when it's green, it's working. And you can see the net collaboration score basically as a systems KPI. So where employee engagement tells you how people feel through the net collaboration score, and what we do, you can see how they work and how they interact to, in the end, deliver your objectives. And how does this work? It works through a simple survey, which takes 5 minutes to fill out, where we basically ask 2 things. One, we ask you, let's take someone on the phone. I see Gunther is there. Gunther, in which team are you? And what's the quality of collaboration within that team? And we ask those questions across those 7 networks, which I just shared with you. Then I ask you, okay, with what teams in the organization do you need to collaborate to realize your objectives? And then I ask you to also evaluate those relations with those teams. And when that's done, our system produces the network, and you will start to see how it functions and where the potential opportunities are to improve. How does it work? It works pretty simple. The only thing we need from an organization is an org chart. And an org chart, this can be 3 teams that need to collaborate to manage a project. This can also be an organization of 1,000 people. This can be a business unit, like an HR team, for instance, a global HR team in a certain business that needs to perform a certain function together. It doesn't matter. So once we have that org chart, we create one simple survey, which is basically a URL, a link, and that URL link you can send to everybody who you would like to participate. It takes 5 minutes to fill out, and once that's done, you get the results. And then the power of our tool is that you can do then a zero-based measurement. So what's the current state of the union, let's say? And when that's done, and then you start to run interventions, you can run the tool again and again to show whether you make progress after the actions you've taken. So let me now take you to a case. This customer is from a small health clinic, a medical clinic in the Netherlands. It's private equity owned. It's quite small. There are 77 people in this organization. There's about 11 teams in a flat structure. And they've got very aggressive growth plans in the coming years to have more clinical units across the Netherlands, etc. But the point was that the owners of this, part of the owners of this business, they got into some disagreements with each other. And basically their mud fights had quite some impact in the organization, where some good people left, some people were for one owner and the other owner, etc., etc. So they started to feel that the misalignment in their organization, coming back to the definitions I used before, was kind of standing in the way to accelerate their plans. So we were hired by the private equity party to see what is going on in the organization and what can we do to improve it. All these people, they filled in the survey, and what comes out is the following. You can see that their net collaboration score is overall minus 12%, which immediately is an indicator for us that there's something not going well in the system. On average, all the organizations we monitor, they score around 1% positive. So this is number one. What you then can do, and I'm now in the summary page of the app, you can start to see the teams that are in this organization and their net collaboration scores. And so you can see some teams that do better. And there are, for instance, here 2 teams, team 5 and 11, that score quite low. Then you can take this net collaboration score apart, and you can see how well they work with each other internally in these teams. And you can see how well other teams work with this organization. And so in this case, this team 5 is pretty satisfied with how they work internally in the team. And you can see that there are quite a few people in the organization. This data is based on 46 respondents that experience some pain with this team. So it's the first picture of where some bottlenecks could potentially be. Then I'm now clicking on the network, and here you will start to see a beautiful chart of how this organization functions with each other. And this picture is different for every single organization, because the teams that are basically more intensely work and interact with the whole network, they will be in the middle of the network. And the teams that are quietly more servicing the rest of the teams, they sit on the outskirts. So what you then can see, the circles are the teams. The color of those circles is the overall net collaboration score, which is a combination of how well they work internally and how they work with other teams. And then these flows, that's where they interact. The direction of the flow you can see here, it flows from team 4 to team 3. there are in total 7 individuals from team 4 that work a lot with team 3, and the other way around, there are about 5 individuals who say they work with team 4. And then the color of these flows also indicate how they experience that collaboration. But let me first show you the overall scores of the company. So the company scores minus 12%, 60 people have filled in the survey. And if I then look at those networks, which I presented to you before, I can see that, for instance, in the operational network, that information sharing scores quite low. If you look in the social network, you can see that psychological safety in the organization overall feels quite okay. But for instance, clarity, strategic clarity is also lacking. What I can then do, I can click on details and I can see what they mean by that. So here's where we capture all the free text feedback, which we also get from the surveys. And you can see that here's all the feedback from everybody in the organization about information sharing, all the feedback about project management, about what's going well and what can potentially be improved. So therefore, I will understand in general what I can potentially do to make the network function better, improve information sharing. And by the free text feedback, I understand the context of that, and I start to know what kind of interventions I can do. Then when I go to the network, I can stand in each of these flows and analyze them. So for instance, let's go to this flow. Team 4 works with team 3. They score this overall collaboration and net collaboration score of minus 17. 7 people have responded. And if I then click down the networks, psychological safety is quite okay. Feedback culture quite weak. But you see, for instance, here in operational collaboration, that in particular scores quite low. So project management, problem solving, and information sharing. And this is the feedback that these people give to that other team. If I look the other way around, I click here, the other team has a different opinion about the collaboration with that team. They're overall much more positive. They only say like strategic clarity can be improved, project management, but information sharing is quite okay. And this is the feedback that they give to that team. So by understanding in a reciprocal way what the opinions, how people experience a collaboration in a mutual way, basically, therefore it becomes very easy to unlock interactions. Then you may wonder, is team 11 only working with team 9? No, you can go to the filter function, because what I just showed you is just the 10% of the most intense areas of collaboration. If I unfilter the whole network, I can see all the connections between the teams. And the filter function you can use because you want to know exactly where's the most of the collaboration and the biggest opportunities to improve, and that's where you can generate the most impact. But the interesting thing about this graph, which might look for you and also for us as an outsider from this company, might look like a nice spaghetti plate. But what, for instance, comes out when I show it to the customer, they can often create stories around this because they know how it in real life, how the organization really functions. And what stands out here is that team 5 in this case sits pretty central in the network, and that means they're quite an important, let's say, hub to make this whole organization work. And they score pretty low because you see here 46 people feedback, and this is this team 5, which I referred to before. So let's then go to that team. So I go here, and let's go and learn more about team 5. I first go to the summary. It's a bit slow. And what I can see here of the summary is they have a net collaboration score of minus 42%. When I then click on internal, external, I can see internal, they are quite satisfied with how they work with each other. There are 8 individuals who scored a plus 16%. But when I go externally, there are about 38 people who are working a lot with this team and experience quite a bit of pain. Because a 59 is, I can tell you, is a low score. And 38 people in that context, in an organization of 77, is quite a volume. So this is going to be critical to start to look into. The 3 relations that are most critical, that are most critical to this team, where there is the most intense collaboration and the lowest scores, where they can make the highest impact and they improve that, are these 3 relations. And if I can go then to the summary of the free text feedback, it indicates overall people indicate a lack of transparency and consistency and clear communication from leadership regarding organizational decisions, changes, and issues. There was a perception of quite an authoritarian leadership style where input from the staff was not genuinely considered and decisions were made unilaterally without proper consultation, and conflicts in the leadership, which we already knew when we were going into this assignment, and certain staff members had led to an atmosphere of intimidation and quite an unsafe work environment. If I then go to the network, I can start to analyze the relationships this team has with other teams in the organization. So here you see all the teams that team 5 is working with to realize their objectives. And based on the thickness of the lines, you can see where the most intense relationships are, and you can then do the same thing. Okay, there's something going on with team 4. This is the feedback in networks. This is what this team writes to that team. And if I then click the relationship the other way around, I get exactly the same picture. And because of that reciprocity, you can start to take action. Now, let me go back to this organization, where the challenge of this organization was that they have the CEO of this company is an absolute authority in the medical space where this organizational operates, and has a very high IQ and a low EQ, and is super smart, but has a tendency to run ahead of everybody, is kind of frustrated, why doesn't everybody understand the strategy yet, like that kind of stuff. And one of the interventions that happened in this organization, which is quite a particular case, was, for instance, that this person has decided to more focus on the medical management of the company, and they hired a more general manager with more people strengths to start to coach more the soft side and do the managerial side of the company. Now, and then coming January, we are going to scan in again if they are making any progress, but this is basically a little story about that company. So I can see some questions coming. Does the model have the ability to incorporate passive O&A, such as metadata, calendar entries, email conversations, etc.? No, we don't do that. And we have quite a history with passive O&A. So just for the other listeners, you've got two types of organizational network analysis. The one is you do it in a passive way, where you look at who interacts with each other in meetings, so who has agendas plans, who sends emails to each other, etc. Microsoft Viva offers those services. Maybe you've seen it once. And then you've got more active O&A, which is done with the survey. And the downside of, we've experienced that the downside of using passive O&A is that, simply said, the amount of emails that you share within the organization doesn't say anything about the quality of interactions between people. And therefore, that data is super complex, and it's very hard to build interventions out of that data. And therefore, we use active O&A, which we do with a little survey. We've worked for quite a while with surveys. We know a lot about survey fatigues in organizations. We've used factor analysis to analyze what are the absolute few unique questions we can ask in a survey. We've ended up with 7 different networks, which I showed you, and that makes the survey quite efficient. It only takes 5 minutes to basically answer. There are basically 3 important things that I want you to remember from this story. One, strategies, they fail if your plan and your organizational components are not aligned. That's number 1. And I hope that's clear, and I'm sure all of you have experienced that in either your advisory role or participating in a company. That's pretty obvious. Then what Cophi can really do for you, by visualizing your organizational system in whatever setup it has, you can identify misalignments, and because the data becomes visible, you can start to take action to improve it. So to go back to that case, which I just shared with you, in an environment where there's quite a level of distrust between teams, it's very hard to engage in conversations. You probably need to do it through one-on-one interviews. But those interviews, the question then is still, does somebody really dare to say what's on their mind? What happens with the information I share, etc.? And in this case, what the systems coach did that we brought in, didn't do any one-to-one interviews, but invited whole teams in the room. And once the team is there, you swing the data on the table, the elephant stands on the table, discussing it and getting examples and understanding what the behavior is under these kind of networks flows that you can see. It goes much quicker. Yeah, and the last thing is, if you take your strategy serious, start measuring collaboration. That's basically the big invitation that I'm giving to you. I'm going to see, are there any further questions, Jamie?
Patrick, there was one question from James Knight here, which I think that it might have been an incomplete question, but the gist was, what is the most impact you have seen from coaches or consultancies in the work that they do?
I can add to that. It's often for coaches, but it is also for leaders. The coach's system is often hard, because to understand what is really happening to teams is very difficult. Once you can, however, see the whole picture, bringing the right teams together in a room to start to solve pains that exist there, or the other way around, celebrating the things that really work to amplify them in the whole organization works, where the positive impact that you can get from this is manifold. One is, we have a client that uses Cophi they have a buy and build strategies, and every time they integrate a new company, they measure the network, and by integrating it, they can start to take out bottlenecks. Another team uses this to manage SAP implementations. An SAP implementation is super hard and complex. So when you take multiple teams that work on a project together to deliver that, you can use Cophi to continuously measure if the information flow and strategic understanding, etc., between teams is clearly understood. So I hope that's clear. So what's the largest organization you've worked with? The largest organization we've worked with is 6,000 people in Asia, where we did a scan there. The smallest organization where we've worked with is 15 people. And in the beginning, when I started working for Cophi, I thought you probably need quite a size of organization to use Cophi. But I learned that because in smaller teams, people know what's going on, so they don't need Cophi. But the point is that even in small environments where people know what's going on, the conversation with each other is very hard, because people speak with different tongues, basically where people have different feelings and opinions and assumptions about stuff. But once you have the data with a very concrete definition of how a functioning network, how that works, and that's the definition I refer to, that's this slide, the conversation becomes much easier. The question then still is, as the last point is, if you have a 6,000 people organization, then sometimes putting all the eggs in the basket and showing a really big network goes a bit beyond what the organization needs. And then sometimes it can be better to, for instance, take the scan and cut it into different pieces to make the data really useful and actionable, and rather than to have one big pile, if that makes sense. You can, for instance, in a very big company, you can start, you can decide to scan, for instance, horizontally. So you take the board and one or two layers under that, and then do in addition some vertical scans in, for instance, business units or separate opcos. So is Cophi also used as a 360 feedback from teams towards leadership? And what is your advice on implementing top-down versus bottom-up use of Cophi? So yes, the tool is definitely used as a 360 feedback to leadership. And this is one of the big benefits of using Cophi. In the end, when you go back, when you remember that slide that I showed earlier, the leader is an architect in the end of their system. So basically what leadership does once they get the scan, they look in the mirror of the system they have created to execute their strategy. And that's one of the big powers of Cophi, is that it will help management understand what their leadership impact is in an organization. For instance, in this organization, which I just showed you, the CEO was quite an, I would describe it as an emperor. And you could see the impact of that on the network. And this person became aware that there was much more supportive role expected. And she could work on that to change her leadership perspective. And what is your advice on implementing top-down versus bottom-up use of Cophi?
Shall I jump in?
Frank, you can. Yeah, jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, unless Frank can clarify. But generally, when we're looking at, I guess, any organizational system, we will start with whatever group has been pre-identified. And if we're looking at a system that is, I will say, large, let's say it's a 20 to 30,000 person system, we'll often start with the top. And so we might take the top 300 to 1,000 people inside that organization. And so that would, I guess, fall into the top down. So once we've established what the top level patterns are, then we can build a bottom up approach, which involves things like sharing the scores with multiple teams. So where we go into bottom up, it would be making sure that there are specific privileges or permissions to say one part of the organization. So let's say a team that's 3 or 4 levels down would have only the net collaboration score relevant to them. And then we can start building kind of from the bottom up, improved microcultures within the system. And then obviously the aggregation of all those little microcultures improves the quality of the macroculture.
What's your best way to measure collaboration among workers that don't have email addresses? Great question. We are conducting currently an exercise in a company in Germany. They are a packaging company. They print carton packs for the Unilevers of this world, etc. And we're using Cophi in their packaging department because there's a lot of waste and there is a lot of line efficiencies. So the planning on the lines is not right. So if they've got a few hundred people that will be scanned, and a lot of those are blue collar workers who don't have a phone and are hard to reach. How we do that is these workers, they come into the factory, they get a little piece of paper with a code, they go to a few computers that are set there in the hallway, and with their unique code, they fill in the survey, and that's it. So there are many different ways we can do it via QR codes and all kinds of stuff. So there are multiple ways by which you can gather the data. Yeah, do you facilitate workshops and debriefings of the data? Yes, that's a really good question. Thank you, Catherine. The question then is, when you get the data, then so what? What do you do with that? And this is where we work with very skilled system coaches, but also we often work together with consultants, of whom there are a few here in the webinar too. So yes, we facilitate that process and we can help to make the right plans and do sessions and coaching, etc. I have 2 last things to say. Let me repeat. The first one thing is, strategies fail if your plan and your organization are not aligned. By visualizing your organizational system, you can identify misalignments and mobilize for change and success. And our clear, strong stance is, if you take your strategy serious, start measuring it. If you have any questions, this is my last slide to show you. Here's a QR code. Scan it and just reach out via the link you get from here and let us know if you want any follow-up discussions. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.